Alright, so for anyone tuning in now, this is the start of of another tournament that I'm hosting, but instead of using LP on my ranked ladder, we are allowing ranked players to have priority seating. So that means it's going to be it's going to be the people that participated on my Discord ranked ladder, and whoever has the highest elo is able to join. And also, if there's any empty slots, players will be able to join in, as long as there are empty slots. Otherwise, they will be put into reserves. I'm joined by my co-caster Dactor, and we're expecting a pretty short tournament today, as it is limited to 8 players. So with that out of the way, Dactor, do you have any opening thoughts?
None in particular. I guess it'll be interesting to see some new faces, given that the qualification for this tournament is different from the previous ones, but should be pretty cool all the same.
Cool. So that out of the way, I'll start messaging the players, and then we'll be able to get into the first game. Okay, and as we get into this Lizardmen vs. Wood Elf game, let's call Kallharrman against Sarmation. Looks like the initial fight is getting underway quite quickly. Looks to be favoring the Lizardmen, though, just due to the fact that the skink cohorts are able to get in a lot of their javelins.
Yeah, some really big damage onto the Glade Guard with Hagbane tips too. Trying to remove the poison first is a pretty cool play, because that is the only poison in this entire Wood Elf roster, actually, aside from the Sisters of Thorn. Aside from that, it's just 4 Starfire Shafts, so now there's no more poison. Oh no, there is one more Hagbane tip, and he is actually going to Burning Head it and kill it. So that's a really nice play. So actually, yeah, poison is pretty much gone for the Wood Elves now, if he can rout off that unit. Should be nice for any cav fights that develop.
Oh, and the Burning Head actually turns a bit and hits some Eternal Guard, and even clips more Glade Guard. Very effective. As for the frontline fight, things are going quite well for the Lizardmen, even with
short of
Darthu.
though.
Yeah, Darthu is looking to break through the center line, but that seems to be quite far away, given that the Lizardmen have quite a bit of leadership.
Now, the Lizardmen are actually getting quite aggressive with their cavalry and moving them into the front line rather than peeling off the incoming Wood Elf cavalry, which is maybe not the best play, but we'll have to see how it works out. He's trying to focus down the Glade Guard pretty heavily and kind of leave his own skirmishers to fend for themselves, because obviously Lizardmen skirmishers are pretty self-sufficient for the most part. But the cavalry is getting bursted down super quickly.
Yeah, on the left flank, though, the Wild Riders are doing quite a good job against the Lizardmen. And as long as the Wood Elf cavalry is alive, they will be quite a large threat. But at this point, they're getting caught, getting hit by the solar engine. And once they're routed off, the Lizardmen will be able to dominate the infantry fight.
Yeah, and a really nice Flaming Sword, actually. Sisters of Thorn rely very heavily on their physical resist. So throwing down the Flaming Sword, giving magic damage to the Chameleon Skinks and the Saurus, gonna really allow them to kill those Sisters of Thorn very quickly. And now Darthu is kind of standing alone in this center pocket. He doesn't have a lot of support, and things seem to be going pretty well for the Lizardmen right now.
Yeah, we've seen this situation before too, where it is just Darthu left. And Lizardmen, if they have a very heavy skink-based army, that can lead to some problems. But in this case, with so many Saurus, Fireballs, and the Solar Engine, I think Darthu is going to be in a bit of a rough time, not to mention the Skink Chiefs too.
Another nice Burning Head going down, killing some Eternal Guard. Yeah, the magic use from the Lizardmen has been really on point. A pretty off-meta pick to go with the Slan of Fire instead of High or Mazda, but it turns out to be working really nicely.
Yeah, the Burning Heads have actually been extremely effective versus the Wood Elf frontline and backline. And it looks like even Darthu is going to get routed off the map.
Oh, wow. That's almost half his HP. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I guess just the combined damage of the solar engine and the Saurus have really pushed them off. It'll be hard to chase down given that the cavalry is coming in. So perhaps not all is lost for the Wood Elves, but they are in a very bad situation right now.
And it's kind of unfortunate. The Wood Elves actually use all of their magic on Durthu, but he does come back now, so it's not entirely wasted. But yeah, he will need to super hard carry. I think he should have one Sword of Daith left. So if the Lizardmen blob too heavily on him, then maybe. But another Fireball coming in and just consistent magic with Fireballs and Flaming Swords coming down to help deal with Durthu and the other high value targets in this Wood Elf build have it's been really good from the Lizardmen. Now Sword of Daith is going down on this blob. It's gonna hit like 5 units, which is actually really impactful, but I don't know. Durthu is gonna need to kill like everything by himself.
Yeah, this will be especially hard too because of that single Skink Chief also. He still has 64 ammunition. So even if the rest of the Saurus warriors get routed off here, Durthu might end up just getting kited by the Skink Chief.
Yeah, I mean that is why Skink Chiefs are so scary, is because they're very slippery and just have basically infinite ammo, so they can kite almost anything to death given enough time.
Nevertheless, Durthu's still holding for quite a long time after rallying, but once again does get routed off for a second time, and this time without cavalry to support. He'll likely be chased off, and that's going to be army losses for the Lizardmen.
Yep,
So
very
GG.
well played from kallharrman.
Yeah,
Manages to protect his backline, manages to take out all of the archers, and from there, Durthu unable to stand alone.
Yeah, there were a few slip-ups, given that the Skink Chiefs were able to were caught out and hit by Durthu a few times. One of them actually getting routed off rather quickly. But aside from that, the build worked out extremely well. And like you said, that backline with the solar engine firing, for basically the whole game unperturbed, was a real issue for the Wood Elves. Well, I'll start off with the dwarves, as I did play them quite a bit previously. And speaking of unexpected builds, I think this dwarf build is quite unorthodox.
Yeah.
We're seeing an extremely elite front line with 2 Iron Breakers and 3 Hammerers. This will be amazing versus something like a Greatsword spam build, but pretty terrible against artillery, and also pretty bad against ranged heavy builds from Empire. If he sees a lot of Thunderers, well, not Thunderers, Handgunners, that will be a rough time for sure. Not to mention, he also has 2 Rangers, really doubling down on being able to beat Greatswords, with only 3 Quarrelers to contest the longer ranges. Miners with blasting charges too will be, of course, great versus Greatswords, but bad against a lot of other builds. Of course, artillery is an option too, but enough discussing strategy. He will also go over the Lords, which is a Rune Lord and a Rune Smith, both with slows, and actually both one with the armor buff spell and the other with the ward save. Master Rune of Negation, which was recently buffed. So we'll have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, very interesting. On the Empire side, we're going to see Balthazar Geltz atop his Pegasus, a Stank, the steam tank, with looks like a couple of Empire Knights in the back, the Sunmaker Hellstorm ROR, 1 unit of Great Cannons, the Sterling's Revenge Free Company Militia, a unit of Handgunners, a Vanilla Free Company Militia, and then a few Swordsmen. And yeah, it doesn't look like any great swords. And for magic, no, and then we have a Witch Hunter, interestingly enough, with magic damage. I'm really curious how that does. It's, you know, I guess it's kind of like taking a pistol admiral against dwarves, where you just kind of try to kite them on foot. I'm not sure if a Witch Hunter is actually fast enough to do so effectively. We'll have to see. But yeah, definitely a very big ranged advantage for the Empire with such a heavy investment into artillery. Could do a lot of damage to this elite front line for sure.
And correctly going for a very wide style of play means that the artillery will be very hard to engage for the Dowie, since if they do spread out, they are more vulnerable to things like the Empire Knights cycle charging them, and also the ranged units outmaneuvering them. And starting off, we're already seeing the Sunmaker is getting in great value. Same with the cannons from Empire, with the front line of Iron Breakers and Hammerers already getting brought down.
Yeah, and this steam tank is going to be getting, it looks like, shots along the side of the dwarf formation, which is super ideal. Man, it takes out 11 hammerer models in one shot there. That is some serious value.
Yeah, and it looks to just to be open to continue holding that position. Empire Knights are nearby too to support, in case the dwarves move in to engage there. And right now it seems like their priority is to take out the Great Cannon and the Sunmaker. If they are able to take out the Sunmaker before it runs out of ammunition, that would be great for the dwarves. But
so a Master
in
of Wrath and Ruin and the Mark by Ulthar are coming down onto Balthazar Gelt. If the dwarves can snipe Gelt, that would definitely be enough to turn the game in their favor, I think.
Yeah, he is quite far away.
Some serious damage.
So he has a little bit of dodging potential, but he can't dodge all of the shots with the slows. Potentially another one could go down, but it does look like Gelt will just barely manage to escape here.
Yeah, I think if the dwarves had rushed over there with their runesmith, they might have had a chance to take him out there, but not quite able to. Now, the Empire Knights coming in onto the Ulsar's Raiders, and another Rune of Wrath and Ruin actually coming down now onto them. So trying to get a pick onto this cavalry. And yeah, I do expect that they'll be bursted down, but they will get in some decent damage first, I think.
Yeah, but a little bit of a rough trade. Both sides taking a lot of damage, but it means that one of the mobility elements is down for the Empire, and without cycle charging, that does put them quite a bit behind. Speaking of, now, we are seeing the strength of it, with a huge charge on the miners with blasting charges. And it looks like the cavalry will likely be able to take them out.
Yeah, in the meantime, the Hellstorm ROR is getting pushed back off of the artillery piece by hammerers, and they are actually very slow, even off the artillery piece. They only have 20 speed, so they are going to be caught by the hammerers and presumably killed right now. So that is a very expensive piece off the board for the Empire.
Yeah, and another unit of Empire Knights actually losing the fight to the miners, thanks to charging the back from the hammerers, is going to put them in a really rough position, with the Empire not really having a ton of mobility left. Ooh, and it looks like the Witch Hunter too, getting a little bit too close to the Runesmith and Rune Lord, is going to be taking a lot of damage, and without disengaging, he will likely die. At this point, even a slow could probably take him out. We'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah,
Empire
taking
Knights?
a lot of damage. Slippery is popped, but yeah, if another slow comes up, because it should be on cooldown still, but it should come off cooldown quite quickly. And when it does, this Witch Hunter should be getting taken out. And indeed, there we go. The Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin onto the Witch Hunter, and he will presumably be falling here. Now, the Ekron Miner is getting some huge volleys into the handgunners, as things seem to be turning in favor of the Dawi right now.
Yeah, and quite heavily too, with the Empires once again, Empire Knights once again getting routed off. Despite getting some good hits with the artillery, it seems like the Empire is just constantly on the run, and they can't really punish the dwarves for splitting up. The Quarrelers have survived surprisingly well, given the fact that most of their supporting infantry is off chasing off Empire units. And another slow, looks like it might have gone down on the Witch Hunter. It has indeed. He's still moving at decent speed though, but he'll likely be chased off the map at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting because it looked like he was gonna route just quick enough that he would get outside of the range of the Rune Lord and probably be able to come back and then kite. But with that slow, he might actually just get chased all the way off the map now. So pretty cool play.
And another charge comes down on the Quarrelers. These Empire Knights just barely not able to finish off these Quarrelers is quite rough, and finishing them off is especially important here, since there is still a steam tank and without having the ranged firepower, it will be harder for the dwarves to actually finish that off. But in this case, with this many hammerers, it might not even be too much of a problem. But nevertheless, the quarrelers do manage to survive, and it's just a few Empire forces left. Not even a unit of handguns here to fire away on the dwarves.
Yeah, it's definitely going very well for the Dolly right now. As the steam tank's starting to engage in melee, it's gotten off about half its ammo, but it needs to hard carry this game. Now, it is kind of like a chariot, but it doesn't have the killing power of, say, Volkmar's chariot or anything. It's more like a terror piece that happens to cause decent melee damage.
Yeah,
so
and
we'll have to see. There are no slayers, which could be important here.
And yeah, usually you would see slayers due to the fact just to chase off range units, but in this case, without them, the steam tank is a little bit more free to bounce around. It will likely be able to terror out the quarrelers off as we head into the late game. But the question is if the steam tank can defeat the hammerers. Not exactly a test that many players have done in the past. So we'll have to see. Of course, if it can use its ammunition, that could be huge. But instead opting to charge into the quarrelers, since they are the most immediate threat, just being able to shoot the steam tank to death. Not to mention, there is also Gelt, and he is moving around, bouncing between the quarrelers, trying to get them to rout. But he's not the greatest fighter, and he's going to have a hard time routing off even a single unit of quarrelers. One of the main strengths of the dwarves coming into play, being able to stay even at very low model counts. And once again, Sunmaker's getting chased off.
Now, we didn't notice this actually before the battle, I think, but the Rune Lord is actually on his anvil, which is a very interesting pick here. I guess expecting some magic damage? Maybe from Volkmar? I'm not sure.
I guess so. It would be good against Volkmar. And that might have been what he was worrying about. Any lore of fire spells aren't extremely effective versus army anyways. So that wasn't exactly needed.
Ooh, Master Rune of Wrath, or just actually regular Wrath of Ruin.
Oh, on the steam tank.
Going onto the steam tank, yeah, as the quarrelers and the hammerers start to drag it down. And as the steam tank gets lower, there's no healing for it. That's looking pretty bad for the Empire, as I'm not really sure if they have a way back into this game at this point.
Yeah, there are still 2 units of Free Company militia, but one is out of ammunition and the other is still on the run from these hammers. So they will likely not be able to participate much in this battle, and it will come mostly down to this steam tank. Already down to 1/3 HP, and against a full HP Rune Lord, if we just look at their combat stats here, the Rune Lord is 40 and 47, while the steam tank is 37 and 10. So it will be taking a ton of damage if it stays in prolonged combat against that Rune Lord, which means that the hope for the Empire is definitely waning. Even if all the rest of the infantry for the dwarves were to disappear, it would still be pretty close even after that. I'll have to see how it plays out, though.
Now, the only way I can think of Empire actually winning this game is, for whatever reason, Hammerers and Ironbreakers do not have immune to psychology. So if the Empire is able to isolate dwarf units and bring their morale down, then they might be able to terror out them off the map and chase them off with the steam tank. And if you can do that, consistently to, say, 2 or 3 units, it might be enough to get you back in the game.
Yeah, and not to mention the dwarves really have no mobility here, and also no quarrelers. So the battlefield presence is going to be very much reduced. So the steam tank will be able to fire off the rest of its ammunition here. And let's see here. Sorry, I just need to do yet more adminning stuff. But yeah, the steam tank will be able to continue using the rest of its ammunition. Gelt will be able to use all of his winds of magic. The real problem here, though, is if he can kill that Rune Lord. the Free Company Militia may be able to do well in that regard, but only if they have enough ammunition.
Now, a Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down on the Sterling's Revenge is maybe a little bit questionable, because it means that that's one less slow for the Steam Tank, and the Ironbreakers aren't going to be able to catch the Sterling's Revenge anyway. So that could end up being actually a pretty important play or misplay, as the Steam Tank doesn't have much to actually slow it aside from the Runes of Wrath and Ruin, of which I think there is only one remaining, a regular one on the Runesmith.
So it will be a lot of cycle charging. This game is slowly creeping back into the favor of the Empire.
The Rune of Wrath and Ruin onto the Steam Tank again, as it's getting caught up in Ironbreakers and now getting charged by hammers. It has 2,500 HP left. Maybe it is not taking any damage somehow, so maybe it is able to actually escape with its 11 melee defense. And yeah, it looks like the dwarves are going to be entirely out of slows at this point. So this Steam Tank, you know, it still has some ammo. I could certainly see it hard carrying this game.
Yeah, and it has enough ammunition where it could finish off the rest of the infantry here. And with the support of the Free Company Militia, there's definitely a chance for a comeback. Final Transmutation does go down.
Overcast coming down on top of the hammers and the two heroes here, doing a lot of damage. And,
yeah.
Gelt does have a lot of Winds of Magic regen, so he will probably be able to continue spamming spells for a little bit longer. He's been using a lot of Winds of Magic throughout the game, but he might have a bit more left still. We'll have to see. If he can get off one more Final Transmutation Overcast, that might be enough to actually seal the deal.
And let's see, just taking stock of the battlefield. Thankfully, the Rune Lord on the Anvil does reduce a little bit of that magic damage, so he will be able to do okay there. And we're sort of running into the problem for the Dowie, where they don't have a whole ton of troops. Or the dwarves don't really have a whole ton of troops to continue chasing the Empire here. You will have to be you will have to the Empire forces will still have to engage with their infantry though, just to allow the Steam Tank to cycle charge. And they are running pretty low. That may be what causes the end for the Empire here. And there are also these Ironbreakers who are amazing against single entities, just due to the fact that they have so much melee defense.
Yeah, and now looks like most of the infantry support remaining for the Empire is about to get routed off. It'll just be the Sterling's Revenge, along with the Steam Tank and Gelt. And there's also actually a Free Company Militia way in the background getting chased by hammers, and one swordsman off in the other corner of the map as well. So the Empire could spend a long time regrouping these tattered forces.
Yep, of course, during this time, he won't really be able to cycle charge with the Steam Tank. That would be a rule break. So at the moment, it's just going to be regrouping. And as long as he's not pulling too much value elsewhere, it's this I will say this is legal. As
long as he's I mean, that one swordsman, I hope he does remember it, soon, so that way we don't have to sit for 10 minutes watching all the pieces of the army regroup, but we'll have to see.
Yep. And it's looking like he's getting into position where he can fire away at these hammers to take them out. Of course, there is still the threat of the Rune Lord, but the Steam Tank does have enough ammunition to kill him. Question is if he'll actually be able to get into a position where he can fire away on the Rune Lord. If it is just the Steam Tank left, he won't be able to slowly run away from it the whole game just to get distance. So time is of the essence for him to actually use up this ammunition, spending it to hit up these hammers. But he'll still need to find a way to deal with these Ironbreakers. There is another unit of Free Company Militia but they don't have a whole ton of AP. So they might have a hard time finishing off the Iron Breakers. We'll have to see about that.
Yeah, and as we get into the extreme late game, the terror and the lack of immune to psychology on the Dwarf roster becomes ever more important. This runesmith could get terror routed right now, which would just be, I mean, very unfortunate for the dwarves. It is actually only at 27 leadership, and it doesn't have ITP, so...
Yeah, and it looks like he is at the verge of getting routed off. Some shots go in onto him. But it's not a huge loss. He's not an amazing fighter anyways. And he really only has the armor buff ability, which isn't too huge. More importantly, these Iron Breakers are going to be the big playmakers here. And we'll be seeing that with their final volley of blasting charges.
Yeah.
They get a lot of damage.
About the Winds of Magic situation for the Empire. Like I said earlier, if Gelt has enough for one more final transmutation, even a regular cast might be enough to win the game for him. But we'll have to see. Now the Steam Tank getting zoned out pretty effectively by the Rune Lord. And the Free Company Militia shooting at the Runesmith, which did come back, probably only for a moment. And the Steam Tank is going to, looks like, get a nice charge in. The Empire does have those swordsmen just now starting to walk their way all the way from the opposite side of the battlefield. So this could end up being an extremely long game. We'll have to see.
Yeah. The problem is though, I don't know if they will actually be able to get into the fight quickly enough. Especially now that the Free Company Militia are out of ammunition. They'll have to engage for the Steam Tank to continue charging. And with the Rune Lord at such high HP, the Steam Tank will have a really hard time finishing him off. I think that's the main problem here for the Empire forces. But at the very least, it looks to be finishing off the Iron Breakers. And let's see, it's just there are also a lot of Empire infantry troops left. So if the Iron Breakers do rout off, the Steam Tank will be able to, I guess, cycle charge the Rune Lord while the infantry pins them down.
Well, it's not like the Rune Lord is exceptionally good in combat or anything either. Like, I don't think Gelt can go man to man with him, especially with Gelt already on low HP. But it's not going to be that terrible, as we will see one of the dwarf infantry units already routing off. The Iron Breakers are gone now. One more Iron Breaker with 24 models left and the Rune Lord. That's it. That is all that remains. And the Empire actually... The Steam Tank is obstructed, and I'm not sure it wants to be firing to this blob anyway, because it'll be doing more damage to the Empire troops, I would think, than to the dwarf ones.
Yeah, Steam Shot actually taking out a single unit of the Sterling's Revenge. But we're getting into a situation where it is just the Rune Lord left.
Terror out onto the Iron Breakers incoming.
Yep, his leadership goes low. The Steam Tank charges in, but the Rune Lord leadership actually spikes up dramatically as he gets into the fight. And any hits that he lands onto the Steam Tank will likely be huge. A miss does come in, despite the 10 melee defense of the Steam Tank. And it will continue to cycle charge him here. Now, important to note, the Rune Lord does have 90 armor, and this is after being reduced by Gelt with the Plague of Rust. So he won't be taking too much damage from the Free Company Militia. And given his still extremely high HP, there's a chance that he'll just be able to carry out the win here.
I don't know, though. He doesn't really have good damage, so I think if the Empire is able to, gang up on him effectively with the Steam Tank, the infantry, and Gelt, it should be pretty easy to kill him.
Yeah, we'll have to see. He's much more of a bruiser than an actual fighter, especially with the low weapon strength. But that 120 armor cannot be understated. So given in a straight up fight against Free Company Militia, I do believe he will do well. While the Empire player decides to finish chasing off these dwarf units. There's also the big threat that the Steam Tank will be able to fire in on the Rune Lord, but the shots, if they do clip the Free Company Militia, it will likely rout them off. So we'll have to see how that trade goes.
Yeah, this Rune Lord just surrounded by a bunch of Empire troops and all of these dead. I mean, there's not really much to analyze left at this point in the game. It's more predictions on who's going to win, because at this point, I think all the Empire needs to do is gather up the remaining troops and begin charging, cycle charging even with Gelt and the Steam Tank onto the Rune Lord, and they should be able to pull it out. Another Plague of Rust going down. I'd really like to see him charge in with Gelt right now while this Plague of Rust is going down, which I understand is risky, but I mean, he'll be doing quite a bit of damage. I mean, 300 weapon strength is nothing to scoff at, even if it isn't great.
Yeah, and with the Rune Lord at half HP now, and the Steam Tank in position to fire away from a distance, we're in a rough situation where he'll have to advance, and the tank does still have quite a few shots left. I do believe at this point he'll likely just get shot to death, and the Steam Tank pulling away to make even more distance against the Rune Lord. Looks like that is going to be his fate, but perhaps some good dodges might come into play, and we'll also have to see how much damage the Steam Tank shots actually do to this Dwarf Lord.
Well, I mean, this one unit of Free Company Militia have dragged him from 90% HP to like 40% HP. I just don't see any way that he can actually survive when Gelt and the Steam Tank start cycle charging him as well.
We'll have to see. Gelt does have he would be about 2 or 3 hits away from routing if the Rune Lord does land a hit, and the Steam Tank would likely be able to tank quite a few hits actually, especially since it is unbreakable. That will surely come into play. And now the shots are coming in.
Oh man, we're seeing dodges because there's nothing to actually pin the Rune Lord in place with attacking rules.
Yep, and yeah, that is the danger of having so much distance from your tank to the Lord. Being a little bit closer would mean that the shots would be more likely to land. And yeah, we'll have to see how this goes. There's not a lot of infantry left for the Empire at all, and it depends on if those swordsmen rout or not.
It's not like there's terror on the dwarf side though, unlike with the Empire. And actually, I think the Rune Lord is not ITP either. No, he is not. So he could be terror routed as well.
Yeah, and that would be one of the worst situations for Empire here. Free Company Militia, their what's it? Their actual oh, what's it called? Their endurance is extremely low, which means that they are much easier to rout. Shot from the Steam Tank 2 looks to push them over the edge, and they get routed off without too many problems. And it looks like the Steam Tank really just isn't getting that much damage in on the Rune Lord. But army losses are on the way, and a near terror rout on the Rune Lord is looking to be the way this is going to end. But man, those shots really do no damage.
In general, I mean, I don't think there's any way that the Rune Lord can win at this point, is there? Not with Gelt like charging him in the back and everything too.
It depends.
We have to give a shout out, by the way. This match has gone on for 23 minutes and counting. I have never seen a game this long.
Yes, this has been a long one, especially the kiting with the Steam Tank. To think it began with a full-on elite dwarf army, but we're seeing one of the downsides of it being that with so many elite and slow troops, it can be very hard to catch out these important units. Gelt finally
actually
coming
charging in, and he's just gonna immediately break the Rune Lord and end the game. So yeah,
army losses.
Yeah, that was a game for sure. Pretty close, honestly. Very impressive of Sarmation to win such a disadvantaged matchup.
Yep, and it looks like the artillery really did well that game. The Steam Tank especially at 3,000 gold value. The Hellblaster ROR or Hellstorm, I think, at nearly 2,000. Doing quite well. And it sort of ended with just the dwarves getting kited out in the end. Even though they were able to secure a very nice lead, they didn't have a lot of tools to really kill the Steam Tank. Of course, the Quarrelers would have done great there, but by being able to kill them in the mid-game, Sarmation really managed to secure that win. Army. The dwarves, they've brought a bunch of miners and many rangers mixed in with bugmans, and also Belagar, Ironhammer, not really part of the Vanguard, just a cheap dwarf lord. Yeah, and that's about it. Presumably, okay, he took his melee defense buff spell. But that's about it. After that, it is a nice, healthy amount of Slayers. 4 of them, one with the ROR, and a Gyrocopter. So a very mobile build, looking to catch out the Wood Elves. And if they do bring a Kite build, they will have a pretty hard time managing this type of Dwarf army. So that out of the way, as we see the Vanguard deployment for the Elves.
Oh my gosh.
How do you think, what do the Wood Elves have?
So they have 5 Wildwood Rangers, which are very good in this matchup. We have a couple of Eternal Guard, which I see a lot. I don't know how much I like them, but I see them a lot. We have 5 Glade Guard, mostly with Starfire Shafts, the ROR Stag Knights, and a unit of Glade Riders with Spears. And this is going to be a very quick game. Now, I'm definitely a bit concerned for the Wood Elves here. I think that they will be getting bursted very heavily. And 5 Miners with Blasting Charges, when you're going, like, the Wood Elves have a weird build because they have 5 Glade Guard, but the rest of their army is, like, rush oriented. And oh my god, this is going to be a very quick game one way or the other, because the Wood Elves are deploying their Lord, and the ROR Stag Knights literally surrounded by the dwarves.
Yep. It'll be an interesting situation, and just to make sure that the players don't catch on, they do tune into the stream, since this is one of the situations where deployment is will play a very large part into the game. We'll simply look the other direction while we wait for the game to start.
So Sarmation saying he's trying to get back on chat's good side. Has to be careful not to give up the goose here and alert the Wood Elves to the presence of all these dwarves around them. Because, apparently the Wood Elves, known for their keen sight, have not noticed yet. And yeah, so the game is going to start, and it's going to start very explosively. With,
fire coming in on both sides, and a charge in the back with the Stag Knights.
And an immediate Dryad summon. That's actually a very quick reaction from the Wood Elves. But, I don't know. The Wildwood Rangers are going to have a really hard time if they take Mining Blasting Charges in the face.
Yeah, essentially.
But at the same time, they will get the Blasting Charges will get bursted super quick by the Glade Guard, as we are seeing.
Yeah, the ROR Stag Knights are quite powerful here, and they can take out a lot of this infantry front line. It's just up to the Wood Elves to delay the engagement as long as possible, so the Stag Knights can clear things out. They actually opt to go away from the center line of the Wood Elves to take some easier pickings here along the right flank, and that does mean that the Wood Elves have to continue pulling back, but the Miners decide to stop chasing, and that means that the Wood Elves will be able to reposition and continue firing in on them. Meanwhile, at the Stag Knights, they have routed off the right flank, but they're taking a lot of damage.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any healing in this Wood Elf build, so it's going to be permanent damage too. Now, they are actually doing a really good job taking out these Miners, and if they kill all the Miners, then the Wildwood Rangers and all the infantry will have a very easy time, I think, chasing down the remainder of the Dwarf build. I mean, Wildwood Rangers don't trade amazing into Slayers, but I do think they do okay. And the Wood Elves just have so much more speed than all of the Dwarf range units that they can kind of run them down over the course of the map.
Yeah, one very major part indeed is the fact that the Wood Elf elite infantry is still at very high HP. With the Dwarf front line mostly collapsed now, they'll be able to simply rush in and chase off these Rangers and Bugmans with very little issues. There aren't too many threats to the Wood Elf frontline, and they'll trade up, I think, into Slayers.
Yeah, in the meantime, by the way, Drycha has Pit of Shades as her only spell. That's the only magic on the Wood Elf roster, and it's doing pretty good damage. Now, you can see that the Rangers are doing good damage into the Wildwood Rangers on this left flank as they approach, but it's not actually so much damage that the Wildwood Rangers are going to die on approach. They will get into the Dwarf lines eventually, and once they get in there, they'll begin trading quite effectively, I think.
Yeah, not to mention that they also have archer support behind them. The Wood Elf infantry has gone off mostly unscathed, taking a lot of damage on the Sylvan Knights instead. That looks to be paying off as the Dwarves are now on the retreat, trying to regroup with their left flank here. Sylvan Knights do come into, charging into yet more Rangers, not Bugmans, which means that they don't have the charge defense against large. And also the Gyrocopters are getting routed off too. So this is looking quite bad for the Dwarves at this point.
Yeah, definitely. As I don't think the second Malevolent Dryad summon has come in either, and they should do quite well against Slayers, or really the remainder of this build. As you can see, the balance of power pretty heavily into the Wood Elf favor now, and man, this is definitely a pretty effective build, it seems, from the Wood Elves. Pretty cool to see.
Yeah, the Wildwood Rangers costing quite a bit. You definitely don't want them to be taking a lot of missile fire. But you can see if by just keeping them safe, or even relatively safe, they are absolutely devastating in the melee. They've traded quite well against the Slayers, and they haven't taken too many shots from Miners. In fact, in general, some really nice play, since we didn't really see that many Miner charges getting thrown for basically the whole game.
No, that's I would say that's what won the Wood Elves the game, actually, is that they were able to shut down the Miners' blasting charges so quickly and so effectively. They just bursted them down before they could do anything with all the Glade Guard. Really good target prioritization, understanding win conditions, understanding that the Dwarves are relying super, super heavily on those Miners with blasting charges.
And there we go. It is it looks like the Wildwood Rangers are going to get routed off. But given the fact that the Wood Elves still have an extremely strong range advantage right now, and the fact that they also have some extra unit of Rangers in the back, I do expect this to be an end for the Dwarves. Maybe holding out for a large misplay. If they can get the Slayers on top of the Glade Guard, that would swing things into their favor. But given kallharrman's play so far, I would heavily doubt that.
Yeah,
And
I mean, the Wood Elves are looking quite healthy. There are even the Wildwood Rangers that are off in the distance chasing off some of the routing dwarf units. And another Pit of Shades. The Pit of Shades have been relatively effective, actually.
Yeah.
Not amazing, but relatively good.
Hitting their marks. The real question here, even though Pit of Shades is good, you want to wonder if Pendulum is more effective. But Pit of Shades definitely still good, and I think it did get its value this game for sure, hitting a lot of ranged troops for the Dwarves. And now Sylvan Knights coming back in for a charge, getting routed off immediately. Not having healing is pretty painful for them, but even so, they still managed to get a whole ton of value this game. Bugmans are getting finished off too. And Belagar is not really, he's not a big enough threat to really finish things off here, especially with Drycha. He'll be able to face him off as long as he's surrounded by infantry. And we are expecting this game to go into favor of the Wood Elves.
Army losses coming in, so at this point it's just about cleaning up the Slayers or waiting for Sarmation to throw in the towel, and he will. So GG. Very nice Wood Elf play there. Definitely an interesting dwarf build. Unfortunately didn't seem terribly effective, but it's cool to see something different.
Yeah, it's just the real problem with that aggressive Vanguard, though. Perhaps expecting a Vanguard from the Wood Elves themselves. All it really did that game was put him into a position where he was taking massive archer fire at the start of the game. He wasn't really able to position fast enough, just because it was very wide and dwarves do have a hard time repositioning. And that early lead really hurt a lot, not to mention the Stag Knights too. It was pretty bad just from the initial deployment, I have to say.
Yeah, and this is an interesting deployment actually from the Dark Elves. They have their Dark Riders with shields way out in front. I'm guessing that's in order to try and get some cheeky picks on some Lizardmen skirmishers if they deploy too far forward in the Vanguard. But if the deployment finishes as it is, then yeah, it looks like the Dark Riders will probably just be taking some free damage at the start of the game for nothing really in return, but it shouldn't be disastrous. Just a little bit of damage.
Yep, a nice reaction from Papa Palpatine, the Dark Elf player, pulling them out and only taking a little bit of damage for the potential of a lot of gains. He's moving up, and looking to take that infantry fight. So, yeah, without really, and also, yeah, looking to take the infantry fight and moving those Dark Riders along the right flank, they'll be able to cover against the Feral Stegodon and also the Cold One Riders.
Yeah, the main target, I think, for the Dark Elves should be that Feral Stegodon, because that's the one thing in this build that will really punish the Hargoneth Executioners. I think the Executioners will have a pretty good time, except for that Stegodon. So if the Dark Riders with repeater crossbows can focus the Stegodon down, that will be very good for the Dark Elves.
Yeah, especially since there is indeed this hill that they seem to be taking the fight on. It will make it a lot harder for these skinks to actually get their shots off onto the Hargoneth Executioners. And if they can just reach combat, they should be good. The cohort of Sotek is also minorly threatening to them, although not massively, just because of how great fighters they are. There we go, the front lines do engage. Looks like just the Spearmen getting in on the fight now. And the Pterodon Riders are coming in. Now, the Rock Drops could make a huge play here. It looks like he's setting it up.
Yep, going for it right now, and...
Oh, and... It's looked like it's taken a while. He does position, and... Has it gone down yet? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Alright, so while we wait for that to happen, the Feral Stegodon has also charged into the Executioners. The Rock Drop comes down, and those Executioners have already taken a lot of damage. But the flanks...
Yeah, they are getting bursted. For
the Dark Elves are going quite well. The left flank is being won by Malekith, and the right has a huge cavalry advantage. We'll see how that goes.
Flamestorm onto the Blades of the Blood Queen.
And
they're gonna dodge it
pull
pretty
out
effectively. Yeah.
They avoid most of the damage. Which is
why you typically don't see Vortex spells, but... Now, the Feral Stegodon is rampaging. If the Lizardman is paying attention, he should be able to unrampage it pretty quickly. But it is taking some pretty good damage from these Dark Rider repeater crossbows, which are sitting and firing away quite happily. They aren't being threatened by too much right now. As, a Bound Banishment going down, tearing apart Dread Spears and Saurus Warriors alike. As a Soul Stealer comes in onto Pterodon Riders, Feral Stegodon, a big Soul Stealer, gonna heal up Malekith quite a bit and do some pretty good damage across the board. As it does look like, though, the Lizardmen are getting the better end of the trade in most of the center engagements, which is where a lot of the value in this game is at.
Of course, Malekith can still make some huge plays, especially with the Stegodon out of the battle. It does mean that there's not a whole lot to contest them outside of these skirmishers, but that may spell his doom. Blades of the Blood Queen are still healthy, and those Dark Rider crossbows are still healthy too. But a huge rock drop.
Yeah, you can see that the Hargoneth Executioners are really just not having a good time here this game. I mean, it looked like they were going to get into the combat okay, but then they just got bursted down almost immediately by Pterodon Riders, and I guess some focus fire from the Lizardmen ranged units. I mean, there isn't really a ton of burst damage in this build, so it's kind of surprising they took as much damage as they did. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why you don't really typically see elite infantry builds, and especially not Hargoneth Executioners.
Yep, they are still managing to stay in the combat, though. These elite Dark Elf troops are very notorious for sticking in the fight even on low models, and this nice group of Dark Elf infantry and cavalry will be able to do pretty well against the Saurus and Skinks here, if they can get the charge. But the Stegodon is back, he's pushing away the cavalry. So I think this game will mostly come down to how well Malekith and the Dark Rider crossbows do in the late game. We've seen before, having a big mobility advantage can be huge in the late game. But right as I say that, these Cold One Knights are going to take a huge banishment. Oh no, a Flamestorm on top of them. But that only rampages them, and it looks like they'll be chasing off the Stegodon. So a good win for the Dark Elves, but now they're out of infantry.
Terrified. The Cold One Knights get terrified by the routing Stegodon as the Flamestorm hits the Stegodon for 10 damage. I guess
it's just enough to get them off, but the Stegodon is extremely low. The real problem for the Dark Elves now is the fact that there is still a Skink Chief and also 2 Chameleon Skinks with a decent amount of ammunition. So even though the Dark Elves are able to put in a lot of damage with their skirmishers, I don't know if Malekith will be able to deal with that. Not to mention also a full HP unit of Saurus Warrior shields. These guys won't be terror routing for a while, and that will likely be a
Yeah.
problem.
There is actually quite a bit of ranged fire too, just still remaining on this Lizardman side. And the Lizardman ranged units, like, it doesn't seem like they do a lot of damage, but when you have just a couple of them, and they're firing in over a long period of time, they will do about as much damage as any ranged unit in the game. So,
yeah, we'll still have to see how the skirmish fight goes, though. The Dark Riders still have a lot of potential, and if things don't go right for the Lizardmen and the Dark Riders are able to use up all their ammunition, that will be the win condition for the Dark Elves. It just will be quite difficult by the looks of it. So some more shots go in onto these Skink Javelins. They actually dodge it by reforming up. But Malekith is doing an okay job causing some terror routes on the bottom side of the map.
yeah, if he can chase off, the tattered units of the Lizardmen and just save the higher health ones, maybe he has a chance to come back into this game with some good breath attacks and cycle charging. But it's definitely looking like the Dark Elves are well on the back foot here.
Yep, and that constant poke damage from the skirmishers are coming down. Skink Chief 2.
Oh, a nice soul
at
stealer
high
though.
ammunition.
That will be hitting 4 units. I thought it would hit 5, but 4 units is still quite good.
Yeah, Skink Chief taking damage too. If the Chief goes down, that buys a lot more space for Papa Palpatine. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And we're actually seeing Malekith getting chased down by just some normal skinks.
Yeah, I'm not... This is kind of wonky. He has 69 speed, but he is poisoned, and he's somehow getting dragged down by and chased effectively by 46 speed units.
And we did mention...
We do see quite often for whatever reason, I think, with dragons. They're kind of a little bit janky on this patch with the mass changes. They have a really hard time pulling out of infantry like this.
He does finally take off, but still at half HP even after the Soul Stealer. But we're seeing a resurgence of the infantry come back for the Dark Elves. There is still a unit of Cold One Riders, which is extremely threatening versus them. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But with this large group of infantry, if they can just hold the line with the Dark Rider crossbows to get their damage in, that is still going to be the win condition. And we're just going to continue keeping an eye on them. But man, Malekith is taking a lot of damage from the skirmishers still, even into the late stages of the game. Seems like he's even having a hard time dodging it too, just because of the effects of poison. And the Skink Chief, at this point, there's not really a whole ton of ways to deal with them, but a big breath attack comes down on the Saurus Warriors, deals a third of their HP. Only a minor victory, though.
Yeah, and Malekith is down to under 1/4 HP, and he is very aware of his healing cap as well, even if he manages to get off another couple Soul Stealers, which I severely doubt, honestly. A Flamestorm coming in, it's a little bit, a little bit optimistic, but it won't be too impactful, I think. It's not like he's relying on the magic damage, and it is actually pathing back into the Dark Riders, maybe?
Perhaps could get in some pretty good damage as the final infantry push for the Dark Elves come in. It looks like shots are now going on to the Slann Mage Priest, and if Malekith can snipe him out, there are some opportunities for terror routing, but he's at a little bit too high HP with Malekith just at a little bit too little HP, given that he's still being skirmished. But the frontline fight begins, and we'll have to see if the Dark Elves actually manage to win it here. It's looking like it may be close, but a little bit Lizardman favored.
Maybe going down. Ooh, the Lizardman managed to get out with the Cold One Riders, but the rest of that blob gets Soul Stealered, and that is pretty good damage. And the Lizardmen have been using their AoEs to try and get picks onto the Dark Riders, and it just hasn't been working. So now they don't have it for this infantry fight, but I'm not sure how much it really matters, because Dark Elf infantry, aside from the elite ones, are really quite terrible in the late game. And a Burning Head going down onto the Dark Riders, and it will go through them.
Yep, not really taking
nice
out any models though.
Oh my god, that kills so many and takes a lot of HP. That might actually trigger army losses. It's quite close. But then again, Malekith diving onto the Slann Mage Priest.
Oh, big hit.
Getting huge damage.
And okay, this is gonna be the Hail Mary play. Dark Rider crossbows are shooting onto the Cold One Riders, and it looks like it's not gonna be enough, sadly. No comebacks for the Dark Elves today, as Malekith gets surrounded. And man, that whiffed Soul Stealer. If it would, if it was placed there, that actually would have been pretty. It could have swung the battle, but Lizardmen did have a pretty solid lead for a lot of that game.
Yeah, and Dark Elves definitely proving to be F tier once again. Chat.
Yep. Oh, totally, 100%. If we look at the damage values here, the Dark Rider crossbows did pay for themselves, but the huge problem in this case was that the Executioners really got shut down by the combination of many of the Lizardmen forces. The ranged power, the spells, and the monsters, rock drops, and so on, all extremely painful.
Yeah, and I don't think Karganath Executioners are very commonly seen against Lizardmen, so pretty curious pick. Maybe, so I have seen, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, I think. I know a lot of Wood Elves have started taking elite infantry against Lizardmen in order to just clear the Saurus effectively with the help of Durthu, just so that way you can push through the front line and get onto the back line relatively quickly. So maybe kind of inspired by that with the Harganeth Executioners instead of, Blade Singers or Wildwood Rangers. But yeah, I mean, Harganeth Executioners I don't think are quite as good, and it's just not exactly the same matchup.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but man, they really did not perform well. One of them barely getting into combat too, but with that, moving on to the next game.
Switch it up a little bit. So the Chaos has Prince Sigvald the Magnificent. It looks like a Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows with Enfeebling Foe, Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, and Pendulum. Going to have a Skirmishing Corps of 4 Marauder Horsemen and 4 Chaos Warhounds with Poison, so very heavy on the Warhounds here. We are going to see a front line with, it looks like, Quad Chaos Warrior, just the regular shielded variant, as well as the Mirror Guard. And then we have 4 Chaos Marauders, 2 of which with great weapons as the cheaper part of the front line. And yeah, it actually seems like 5 Chaos Marauders. So a very, very, very wide, very cheap build from the Chaos here. How about the Dark Elves?
Well, for the Dark Elves, we are seeing one of those more defensive styles of play, actually opting for Shades and the ROR Dark Shards. These guys, they come with what do they come with?
It looks like Armor Sundering. Oh no, it's Shield Breaker. Actually,
very
that's kind of
interesting
cool.
Choice. Yeah.
Like because there are shields on much of the Chaos roster that you'll want to be bursting. So
yeah, they will be able to actually do pretty good work versus the Chaos Infantry. We also mentioned earlier, Dactor pointing out that Harganeth Executioners are great here, and we expect them to be cutting up the front line of the Chaos. They'll just, of course, have to worry about Pendulums and Marauder Javelins. We also have a Dreadlord with just Sword and Shield. Very interesting pick. I want to see what items he actually decided to take here. Looks like tons of damage boosting, and that's about it. He's just sort of like a Dragon Lord, just only combat style and no spells. So he'll be hitting extremely hard, and whatever he does decide to take a fight against should do pretty good. We also have some Corsair handbows, just as part of the front line, really. They do okay versus Chaos since there's not a lot that can catch them. And whatever can actually catch them, they can usually fight. Cold One Dread Knights too. Should be good versus the Hounds. So far, it looks like the Dark Elves build-wise have spec'd decently, well, it's not that they spec'd well against the Chaos, but Chaos seemed a lot more ready for a kite style of Dark Elf play. So this will be interesting.
that's true, but at the same time, I mean, Chaos has like 8 mobility units, and the Dark Elves have 3. So it will be quite difficult for the Dark Elves to protect their ranged assets. It's not impossible by any means, but it will be difficult.
Yeah, and Papa Palpatine going extremely wide with his mobility will be great for actually shutting down the shades. If he can get that to happen, then that will be quite good
The Dreadlord
for the Dark
whiffing
Elf player here.
his first breath attack, and the Mirror Guard actually taking a bit of damage from the, it looks like the Black Ark Corsairs, but not a ton of damage. Now, the Marauder Horsemen and the Warhound starting to pressure in onto these Dark Rider repeater crossbows. And Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma going down is kind of like a baby Spirit Leech onto the Blades of the Blood Queen, actually doing decent chip damage, so not too terrible there.
Yeah, actually a very surprisingly high amount of damage there. Actually quite worth it given how expensive those units are. But the skirmishing is still going quite well for the Dark Elves, as they do have a more defensive style of army. Their ranged troops will do much better against the Marauder Horsemen, just due to massive missile fire. And a Chaos Warhounds getting a pick onto the Cold One Knights. We'll see how this engagement goes.
The Cold One Knights are just getting bursted right now. That's actually crazy.
Yeah, but Malekith does come in, and it looks like a double terror route on the Warhounds is going to make that a little bit more of an even trade than he would have wished. A pendulum too comes down on the
and beautiful
blades.
Pendulum there.
And we're seeing again.
Shades are getting, they're getting compromised pretty heavily here by Marauder Horsemen.
Yeah, so far we haven't really seen the spectacular use of Harkonneth Executioners today. They've just been having a very rough time, taking a lot of damage before the battle starts. But now, as the front lines do engage, they do slam into Marauders, and we expect those guys to get cut down extremely quickly.
Yeah, but Chaos is actually taking a lot of damage on their mobility pieces. So if the Dark Elves are able to kill all of the Dark Elf or all of the Chaos mobility, then all of their mass amounts of ranged units are certainly a strong win condition. As another nice pendulum coming down, this time onto the Mirror Guard from Dark Elves.
And another Melkoth's on the Blades of the Blood Queen.
Ooh, yeah. And again, pretty good damage, actually.
Yeah, but now we have Shades actually getting taken out by some dogs. It looks like they will be taken out. A big loss for the Dark Elves. But the front line is still doing pretty well. 2 Harkonneth Executioners at full HP is good, but their back line's really falling apart with the infantry now looping around the flanks.
Yeah, this is kind of the problem with this sort of Dark Elf build, where it's, it doesn't have a lot of mobility to protect the ranged assets. It's speccing into mobility, it's speccing into ranged firepower, and it's also speccing into elite infantry, which means it doesn't have the width necessary to match this sort of ultra-wide chaos build.
Yeah, with many of their range units getting compromised, the Black Ark Corsairs will still trade up well into the dogs, but the actual ability to fire now for the Dark Elves is getting really shut down. Malekith has dived in 2 on top of Sigvald, and that could end extremely badly, but he has also routed off the Chaos Sorcerer. So a decent trade as long as Malekith can actually, or not Malekith, but the Dreadlord can actually escape.
Yeah, it's Sigvald is just so unbelievably tanky, though. Look at him. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, and once again, we're seeing along the right flank, more skirmishers for the Dark Elves getting shut down. And it's really just these Executioners left, and without any support, the Marauder Horsemen will be able to take them out. We're seeing the Dark Elves really just get overrun here by the numbers of chaos.
Yeah,
Pendulum does come down.
Nolosi hasn't done a ton of damage yet to justify... Is it her pick or his pick? I'm not sure what the Dreadlord Sword and Shield is. But anyway, its pick. Yeah, not doing a ton so far. Now the Shadow Magic has been quite good. And this breath attack is a lot better than the earlier ones under the Chaos Warriors. So maybe, I don't know. It definitely seems like the Chaos have an overwhelming advantage. Despite the balance of power not being that bad, the state of the game is just really rough for the Dark Elves. None of their elite missiles are able to fire. Their dragon is not going to be terribly effective against so much infantry in Sigvald. And yeah, it'll be quite difficult for sure.
Yeah, we're seeing another Hail Mary play once again, trying to snipe out the Lord trying to hit Sigvald since Terra routes could very well cause a win here. But even with all of their buffs procced and a charge in on Sigvald, his stats are just a little bit too strong, and he puts a pain onto the Dreadlord, looking to be taking it out,
Yeah, knowing
especially
the
with the
Dark
jab
Elves,
support.
Nolosi probably doesn't mind this too much, but still, that is a lot of damage. Oh, goodbye.
Yep. And there they go
Rip in
with
pieces.
2 losses for the Dark Elves back to back.
F tier faction confirmed.
Ooh, quite unfortunate there. So yeah, that heavy mobility advantage really shut down the range for the Dark Elves. They had 4 range units that they needed to protect, and if you just look at their damage values, only one of them managed to pay for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, this
Yeah.
is, like I said, it's just kind of, I mean, it feels almost like a scatterbrain kind of build. Like, you can go with either an elite infantry corps and then, you know, have support for that, or you can go with a ton of, like, elite missile units and have protection for that. But I don't think you can really afford to go with both, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that was pretty decisive from Chaos there. It did feel like they had good control of the game throughout. So getting into our third game with Papa Palpatine against kallharrman. Starting off with the Wood Elves of Khal, we have a nice minor cavalry style of play. It's going for the Arawar Hunters of Kurnos and Glade Riders, and that's it. Not a whole lot of cavalry. Nice if there's a ton of spears on High Elves. They're not as much of a threat. Instead, going for a heavy Glade Guard play with Deep Wood Scout Swift Shiver Shards. This is looking like a very heavy archer style of play, but instead of kiting, it's going to be a an aggressive shooting style. The Swift Shivers are amazing versus High Elf Infantry, since they don't have a lot of armor. And we're also seeing some War Dancers, Wardens of Sithril, and a lot of Eternal Guard unshielded. So a medium front line. More importantly, though, for the Lords and Heroes, we have a Caster of Shadows with Pendulum and Enfeebling Foe. Very standard. The Glade Lord with a net. Looking, I guess, to catch Cavalry or other kite. I'm interested to see where that goes down. So with that, Doctor, let's see that High Elf build.
This is a very off-meta High Elf build. Actually, both these builds are very off-meta, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The High Elf one more so, though. It's an Archmage of Light with Shem's Burning Gaze, Faw's Protection, and Net. Double Arcane Phoenix, without any healing, mind you. 4 Shadow Warriors, which is by far the most normal part of this build. It looks like quad Illyrian Reaver and triple Spearman. This is wild, man. I don't even know how to analyze this. I've never played. I don't think I've ever seen either of these builds or anything quite like them in this matchup. The Wood Elf one, a bit off meta. The High Elf one, just completely out of this world.
For sure, double Arcane Phoenix is just insane, but they do have let's see. They have fire resist. I don't think there'll be a ton of fire damage from the Wood Elves though. And that's about it. Just some physical resist, and they're just some large tanky monsters. This is clearly I guess a sort of skirmish style of play coming from the High Elves. A little bit of a role reversal, since usually it's the Wood Elves that prefer that. And instead the Wood Elves are the ones taking the place of the High Elves, going for more of a standard archer backline. So, as for how I think this will go, I think the double Arcane Phoenix might be a little bit hard to shut down, actually, with what the Wood Elves have, unless the Phoenixes really get out of position. What are your thoughts?
Well, there are nets for the Wood Elves, and I mean, the thing is, I don't know if Arcane Phoenixes are terribly effective against Wood Elves in general. We'll have to see how they do. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting pick. I'm mostly concerned that they don't have any healing. The fact that they have no healing is really crazy to me because Arcane Phoenixes, typically when you take double Arcane Phoenixes, it's with Larry and abusing Star of Avalorn. But instead, just going with the double Arcane Phoenix is kind of on their own merit. And the Archmage of Light, I guess he wants the net in order to net down units for the Arcane Phoenix to bombard them. Typically, when you see a net as High Elves with a flying monster, you expect Star Dragon, not Arcane Phoenix, because Arcane Phoenixes, they don't have breath attacks. They don't do anything to single entities. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm quite concerned, I think, for Palpatine here, though.
Yeah, I think it might have been a crazy play from Palpatine. Here's the theory. The ROR Stag Knights have... Yeah, the ROR Stag Knights, they won't fall over or get pushed aside from the Flamestorm ability of the Phoenixes, which is usually what makes them a lot less effective versus infantry. But against against cavalry, as long as the cavalry isn't moving, they can actually get a lot of damage. So I have a feeling that the idea was to net the Stag Knights and then Flamestorm them to death, but sadly, we won't be seeing that. But if my theory holds true, I think, yeah, the Wild Riders would be the ones to take those Flamestorms. Other than that, there aren't really that many good targets.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't typically see. Oh, we're going for a pick immediately onto the Glade Lord. Oh, that's really unfortunate.
Okay, so just too early. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty common mistake actually. If you're not super used to using like nets. Oh my God, the Shem's Burning Gaze, and it actually looks like the Glade Lord might still get killed here, especially with no healing on the Wood Elf side.
Yeah, but oh man, waited, he just barely escapes. Yeah.
Yeah, if he had waited with that first volley, it would have been enough to one-shot the Glade Lord. Instead, he shoots the first volley off a little too early. Now the Flamestorm comes in, and it's a little bit effective. It kills about almost half of the Swift Shiver Shard unit, so not too bad.
Yep, takes out a quarter of their models too, which is the main important part. But the fact that the Glade Lord lives is huge, though.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool cheese with the stalk and then the net, but just not quite timing up the volley correctly.
Yeah, still though, a very nice advantage because the Wood Elves also do not have healing. All damage is permanent unless the Phoenixes get their Rebirth ability going. Yeah, so we'll have to see how that goes.
Which is quite interesting because these are two factions that you almost always see healing, especially the Wood Elves. I guess they really wanted Miasma because they could have taken the Pendulum with a Branch Wraith and had Earthblood.
Oh, and a Shen's Burning Gaze hits a Glade Lord, but she just barely keeps it together.
Yeah, big damage though. And these Shadow Warriors are trading quite well into the Wood Elf Archers. Pretty much across the board. So it's going relatively well for the High Elves, I think.
Yeah, just continuing to pull back and using their, oddly enough, superior ranged advantage. But now it's a big, heavy push from the Wood Elves. Their Glade Riders their Glade Guard will be able to advance and shoot at the same time, but a big pick is looking to go in towards the Glade Lord while the infantry progresses. A net does come down.
Onto the Arcane Phoenix, and now he's going to turn and be able to probably burst it almost completely.
Yeah, it's taking a lot of damage, but the air staggers.
Animations in the air are actually saving it, but it might not be enough. But the Glade Lord does die.
Yep, big Shen's Burning Gaze, and there's still a full HP Phoenix roaming around. It won't be able to land because of the Wild Hunters of Kurnos, but given the right opportunity, it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, this is one of the cheekiest games I've ever seen, actually. This is just constant attempts to Lord snipe each other and snipe each other's value targets. It's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, and actually a huge pick.
Oh, that Pendulum kills everything there. Wow, it kills 2 entire units, but unfortunately, it's 1 from each side.
And a Flamestorm on the right flank now. Oh man, actually really looking to clear out that infantry. And
yeah, the Wardens of Sithville, which are actually a very high value target here, because they are shielded, so they will not be taking much damage from the Shadow Warriors, and they have anti-large armor piercing. Now, another Flamestorm coming in from the almost dead Arcane Phoenix onto some archers. Not going to be doing a ton of damage, but will that Phoenix get its rebirth? That is so huge, whether or not it gets that ability.
Yeah, we're seeing terror routes across the board too because of the dead lord for the Wood Elves. And now here comes a huge play. Wild Hunters of Kurnos coming in to charge down the Shadow Warriors. It doesn't look like a net is here. And if they can clear out the Shadow Warriors, that'd be big, but they're going to have a pretty hard time with the Warriors split up and shooting into their backs.
Yeah, Wild Riders definitely take a lot of damage. And the net is coming in now. It's a little bit late, but it should be in time to finish off the Wild Hunters, especially without any healing available. And man, this one Arcane Phoenix is just in the back chasing off units. It's 600 HP. It doesn't have a care in the world. And man, it is definitely looking like a pretty decisive high health victory with this crazy cheese build coming in.
Yeah,
Managing
multiple
to snipe
snipes.
out the Lord and just, yeah, from there, I mean, able to kite the Wood Elf build back, so.
Yeah, and the fact that the Arcane Phoenixes with their terror and mobility, as soon as it combos really well with sniping out the Lord, since without their leadership, the terror is just so much more effective.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty cool, definitely, to see the stock ability on that Archmage coming into play. Not something you see terribly often, but it actually, I mean, I'm not going to say it single-handedly won the game, but it had a huge part in that early Lord snipe.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't think there's a whole ton to deal with a full HP Arcane Phoenix, let alone a second one at low HP. So this is looking like, yeah, like it should just be closed out here. Of course, there is still a lot of infantry from the Wood Elves, but infantry alone is not enough to deal with these large threats. The Shadow Warriors have used up all their ammunition. But at this point in the game, it's not especially needed. But they are moving into combat now. Do you feel like there's any hope for the Wood Elves here?
No, not really.
Very decisively, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to kill the Arcane Phoenixes, really, on top of anything else. And there's actually still that one way off in the distance that could get its healing proc, and if it does, it would even be able to come in and be impactful in the late game if it got to that point, but I doubt it will. The Wild Hunters of Kurnos are so low. Like, they have decent models, but now army losses is actually starting to hit. As, yeah, GG. So the finals are decided. Well done by Palpatine, coming in with a very interesting build and managing to catch Kallharrman off guard.
Yeah, I think that was really nice. It would have been even more effective if he managed to kill the Glade Lord at the start. And with the stealth too. Just really nice choice, since the net will come in as a huge surprise. And also just the fact that the Phoenixes were netted in the air. You have to be very aware that their stagger animations will dodge a lot of arrows that get fired in on them. And that did save the first Arcane Phoenix that got netted. Oh wow, look at the value on the Shadow Warriors. Yeah, thousands and thousands.
I mean, Wood Elves have very low armor, so if you're able to kite them, then you will get a ton of damage value with those Shadow Warriors. Normally, of course, with the Shadow Warriors, you're worried about running into Way Watchers, who have a little bit better arc of fire and just faster projectile speed, which gives them a slight edge in the kite game. But if the Shadow Warriors are able to be uncontested, they will kill pretty much everything.
Yeah, and they did. So GG as we move on into the finals. So for the Skaven, it is, or for the Wood Elves, it's very important that they actually finish off these mortar models. For the Lords, we have Thwot, the Unclean, with his basically a full kit setup. He has summons, he has healing, and is quite nice, especially combined with a Packmaster. As long as they live, they'll likely be hitting their healing cap, and they really have to worry about the Wood Elf archers here. After that, it's just a whole bunch of clan rats and rat ogres. So basically, it's your usual Skaven build. There's even a Plague Priest with summons. It's very close to the builds of yore, just with a little bit of an upgrade using the Packmasters.
Yeah, okay. So there's no Arrow of Kernus targets here, so it's kind of unfortunate that he took the double Waystalker. Looks like he's firing in onto the Poison Wind Mortars, but I'm not actually sure about that because he's only going to kill one model with the two volleys of the Arrows of Kernus, and that's about what you would expect. I would much rather see the Arrows of Kernus go onto Throt, actually.
Yep, and now we're about to see the devastating effects of the Poison Wind Mortars. They do manage to get their shots off, and it will almost certainly hit these Deepwood Scouts.
Yeah, it's going to hit, it looks like 3 of the 4 units and just do massive damage. Now,
a very nice
I will
start.
say, by the way, Icepower did get maybe a little bit lucky here, or I guess you could say he correctly predicted the Wood Elf build. He has 0 anti-air of any kind. So if Palpatine had gone with the Sisters of Twilight, it would have been extremely tough to deal with. But
for sure,
we are seeing a ground-based build from the Wood Elves, and the Poison Wind Mortar is already almost killing a Deepwood Scout unit with just 2 volleys.
Oh, and big hits on the Glade Riders too.
Yeah,
the direct hits are actually still quite threatening, and that's a lot of damage. He does sacrifice 2 Skaven slaves to get the damage off. Definitely very worth it. And the Plague Monks are pushing back the right flank for the Skaven here, which means all he has to do now is really just focus on the tree men.
The Plague Priest is getting killed by the double Waystalker. The Plague Priest is gonna die. Oh my god, the Plague Priest is dead.
Jeez, okay. So very nice pick.
Surprising. Yeah, that's a great pick, actually.
Yeah,
it
huge
might
loss
actually
for
be
the
enough
Skaven
to turn this game at least back to even from a pretty bad start from the Wood Elves.
Yeah, Throt 2 is also taking a lot of damage, and if the right flank falls and the mortars get shut down, the Deepwood Scouts have full range to snipe out the heroes.
Oh my god, Throt is about to get Arrow of Kernus sniped. Oh boy, I told you that they were good against him, and good by Throt as well. Wow, and the terror from the Arwar Stag Knights is about to be so impactful.
Yeah,
now,
and
Throt
that
will
massive
probably
push.
come back. But oh my god, this game went in a totally different direction than I thought it was going to go. Oh,
and
the
Packmaster
is about
too,
to rout.
taking a ton of damage. They are great
brutal
versus the large single entities of Wood Elves, but they are extremely squishy, almost glass cannon style, and those archers will really melt them. A huge problem too now. Throt is being chased by the Sylvan Knights, but they pull back, moving back in, and if they chase off Throt, I think that's just game for Skaven.
The RR Stag Knights are actually one of the only units in the game fast enough to catch Throt too. So very unfortunate. Man, the Plague Priest getting sniped, I think, is what really started to turn this game around though, because without the summons, I mean, it's not like these Skaven slaves are going to actually hold. They're really just there to buy time for the summons to come off cooldown.
Yep, Throt, he does come back, but he's going to take a huge charge from the Sylvan Knights. But there's also the big problem that the Treeman and the Treekin in the distance here have nothing really that they're worried about. As soon as the Packmaster and Throt are down, or even occupied, they can just continue fighting with no problem.
And the Plague Priest does come back for a moment, and will it get this last summon off?
It looks like he will.
Somehow, even though it died before the summon went off. But still, Throt getting chased down by these Stag Knights. It looks like he will actually manage to escape. Oh, but the Arrows of Kernus coming in. And brutal damage. I did. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
man,
he
the
shatters.
Double Waystalker.
Oh dear.
Just solo carrying this game. These Double Waystalkers literally just won this game all by themselves. I mean, that is crazy.
Man, the picks on the Plague Priest with their normal fire and Arrows of Kernus on Throt just tore apart this Skaven build. It looks like really just
that warms my heart. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a biased caster, but that is beautiful play.
That was
Waystalkers solo carry games.
Insane. Oh boy. They actually got in crazy value. If you look at them, they got almost 4,000 value in gold combined, and almost single-handedly really winning it out there. Going for the Tree Man too.
To really put this into perspective, the Double Waystalker got almost as much value as the Double Poison Wind Mortar.
Yeah. Not to mention, also to mention too, the Poison Wind Mortars, even though they can get in a lot of damage, they weren't actually able to kill off the Deepwood Scouts. If you look at the model counts for them, it's still very high. So in this situation where he had no way of catching the Deepwood Scouts, the Poison Wind Mortars got even less value than they got much less value actually than what is shown here. So just some very just a really nice push with those Deepwood Scouts, and having them not get shut down was absolutely huge. Of course, with the Lord Snipes too. It was, oh man, as soon as we got into the mid game, it was really just a Wood Elf domination, I have to say.
I mean, it was really like, I don't even think it's an exaggeration to say that the Waystalkers were what won that game single-handedly. Like, they killed everything of value. It was definitely a misplay from Icepower, allowing them to snipe the Plague Priest without even having to use any abilities or anything, just walk up and kill it. But yeah, the burst damage onto Throt, that's actually why Throt is kind of risky in this matchup. Double Waystalkers burst him down very effectively. And yeah, I mean, just really solid play, definitely, from the Wood Elves all around, though.
I think so. So, coming in from the Bretonia side, taking a look at Icepower's army fighting for his tournament life in this game. He has brought a whole, actually a pretty interesting build. It looks like, oh no, never mind. Just going for the usual men-at-arms, taking some peasant archers, mixing in pox arrows, and a bunch of knights, actually mixing in mostly Knights of the Realm with some elite cavalry in the form of Grail Guardians and the Knights of the Lionhearted. But otherwise, a very standard Bretonia build with a few more infantry units instead of archers, because he is facing up against the Beastmen. His heroes are the usual Damsel of Life and King Lewin. Very standard pairing. So yeah, aside from that, there's not much else to say about this build.
Yeah, looks like a pretty typical Bretonia build. On the other side, the Beastmen coming in with, it looks like a full melee rush, which we actually saw a lot of Beastmen last tournament, and it was almost always full melee rush as well, so very interesting. It's a front line of 5 Ungor Spear Herd. It looks like a couple of Chaos Warhounds with poison, 1 Vanguarded in the back, a ton of Razor Gore Herd, it looks like 3 in total, with a pair of Minotaurs with great weapons, a Bray Shaman of Death with Spirit Leech, a Bray Shaman of Wild with Vile Tide, and of course, Morgar the Shadowgave hiding somewhere, I think. Actually, not sure where he's at, interestingly enough. He must be hiding somewhere. Oh no, wait, it's Kazrak. That's why I couldn't find him. It's Kazrak. That's wild, actually.
Definitely
Kazrak
off meta.
Vanguarded up in the... I literally wasn't even looking for a Vanguarded Beastman Lord. Definitely not a meta pick. Very cool to see. Then we also have a couple Centaurs with throwing axes and the Blackhorns Ravagers to round out this build.
Yeah, yeah, just a very heavy rush build, but we have an interesting situation here where the Bretonian infantry is actually stronger than the Beastmen infantry. Given that it is so meta to go for just a line of 5 peasant archers, by going a little bit heavier on your infantry front, you can actually pull in some pretty surprising wins there. So with the game getting started, we'll have to see if the Bretonian infantry do manage to hold with the cavalry support, because the mobility of the Beastmen will be able to pull in a lot of that value. So we'll have to see. There aren't a whole ton of archers either, so it's going to be, this game will mostly be determined by how well the cavalry cycle charging goes down. So, just starting off, some archers fire away at the Ungor, and if the Bretonian get a landslide infantry victory, that would likely be game just there, but I suspect that won't be happening.
Yeah,
as we're now seeing.
To commit to the fight now, it looks like, or at least moving up a little bit. I would like to see, I guess, the Minotaur is getting in there and helping out with this infantry fight. But it's definitely a weird situation, not something you see very often in this matchup. Now, a nice Vile Tide going down onto the Men-at-Arms, doing some good damage, but honestly, that's not terribly high value. I would almost think that just Spirit Leeching Cavalry would be more effective at the moment. But Beastmen do definitely want to make sure to win the infantry fight as much as possible, at least.
Yeah, and we're actually seeing some very nice charging in from the Beastmen. The cavalry being used to defend the back line for Bretonia means that their front line is actually falling apart rather quickly.
And Kazrak actually breaking one of the flanks.
Yep, Lewin moves in. Oh, and now we have a big situation going down. Lewin does get surrounded by Beastmen, but he has two cavalry to support.
Yeah, the Knights of the Realm coming in, and these Razor Roars are going to get charged in the back. Now, the Minotaurs with the great weapons are coming in. If they're able to get a full surround and pin in Lewin, that could be huge.
Yep, the only hope for him at this moment is some very powerful counter charges from the Knights. And they do come in. It looks like he may be able to escape. But the center line is also crumbling rather quickly for the Bretonians. It looks to be holding decently well in the middle, possibly a stabilization, and Lewin does manage to escape.
Yeah, and the Chaos Warhounds just a little bit slow in getting there. Now, the Beastmen are kind of getting their hands into the cookie jar of these Peasant Bowmen, but I don't know, I think this Beastmen army has lost a lot of its momentum. Now, it is getting some nice trades into these Knights of the Realm on this flank. If they're able to kill all of the Knights, then, of course, the Bretonians will pretty much run out of stopping power.
Lewin does get a heal.
Throwing axe is going to need a lot of value, though.
Yeah, and a big play charging onto Kazrak. If he does manage to take him out, that would be an insane swing given the terror and the leadership debuffs. And Lewin with the heal is not too afraid anymore, especially the center corps getting nicely chased away by the cavalry. And some big hits on Kazrak, but Lewin has heal capped. As for the backline of the Bretonians, their archers have stabilized and are actually continuing to fire. This could play out very well as we head into the late game. And so far, Kazrak is at half HP, but also Lewin. So Icepower will definitely have to play very carefully there.
Yeah, he's landing in some Minotaurs with great weapons, which could be bad, but the Minotaurs don't have a ton of support right now. And both the Minotaur units actually super low on HP, so we're seeing this big charge come in from the Knights of the Realm here, trying to shatter this big pocket of Beastmen. Apocalyptic Vision going down, giving some nice leadership and melee defense. And that might actually be enough to swing this blob fight in favor of the Beastmen. As you can see, mass wavering on the side of the Beastmen now.
Yeah, Lewin does manage to take off. But, oh wow, Lewin actually does decide to go back in. A little bit of a risky play. If Lewin dies here, the advantage of the archers in the back could be completely lost. But he does look to be pulling it out again. We'll have to see. And at this point, it looks like he will be able to take off.
Yeah, I think that the Bretonians are pretty heavily in the lead here just because they've won so decisively, except for this small pocket. Yeah, the Peasant Bowmen are going to be a really difficult thing to handle for the Beastmen because they don't have any shields. They don't really have any armor. They're just going to be taking a ton of damage very quickly from these Peasant Bowmen.
Yeah, they've secured the mobility advantage too fairly nicely. It's really just these two Centaur throwing axes. And aside from that, the Beastmen don't have any infantry support. Definitely an uncomfortable position to be in. Not to mention, Bretonia also has their line of peasant mob ready to defend the archers. And that makes it real difficult for the Beastmen, especially with the Minotaurs getting routed off. And Bretonia pulling a pretty massive lead, but another big charge in from Lewin. Having apparently no fear at all, gets in a lot of damage, takes a bit himself, but whether or not that's a misplay is, I'd be on the fence about that.
Kazrak almost dying to Spearman at Arms. That's pretty Kazrak of him.
Yep,
yeah, the balance of power very heavily in the Bretonian favor at this point.
Yeah, he does get a good charge onto the peasants, but a big charge from Lewin, countering, bringing down Kazrak to basically no HP. Even if he does escape here, he likely won't be coming back from rout. But in return, Lewin does get brought pretty low. Only problem is we still have a lot of cavalry here, and they are Grail Guardians too. Some of the most elite cavalry for Bretonia.
And the only reason why it isn't army losses is because Bray Shaman have like this ridiculous effect on balance of power. Other than that, and we are actually going to hit army losses with 2 full health Bray Shamans, so
And
it's going to
there
be
we
GG,
go.
and we will go to the ace match.
So just a very yeah, very very interesting game actually. If we take a quick look at this, the peasant archers basically lost no models and were able to bring it out in the late game. It seemed like the Bretonians just having a little bit more infantry and using their knights to defend the archers seemed to have been what won it out there. Along the right flank, Lewin was dueling it out with Kazrak and these Minotaurs. And where that traded a bit evenly, winning the rest of the fights around the map really pulled through. Now, for the final game, Papa Palpatine against Icepower's vampire accounts with Palpatine on Chaos, and a lot of mind gaming that just went down. We shall begin with the builds of the vampire accounts, looking like a very, very standard playstyle, except for the fact that this Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is on foot, apparently forgetting his dragon mount for today, going to be a whole lot cheaper, and that will afford him some nice options, such as the Vargul, the Mortis engine, and let's see here, just some Black Knights. There are a lot of Graveguard though. Well, actually, no, just 2 units of Graveguard. Where did the money go for the vampire accounts? A little bit strange. But yeah, I guess really just that Mortis engine and the Vargul are eating a lot of it. He also has some hounds and bats, great for chasing off the Chaos Skirmishers. But as I say that, we're gonna have to take a good look at their army because it is quite interesting. Dactor, take it away.
So the Chaos trying to counter the Foot Blood Dragon Vampire Lord with a Hell Cannon box. So we have 2 Hell Cannons. It looks like triple Chaos Warrior with Halberd, triple Chaos Marauder, a couple of Chaos Spawn, a Chaos Giant, and Archaon the Ever Chosen with Burning Head, and then Fireball, and what is it? The magic and fire damage thingy. The
Flaming Sword.
Yes, Flaming Sword. All right. But yeah, double Hell Cannon is pretty wild. That is magic damage, so could be decent against the Banshees if it can hit, but I'm guessing it'll be used to focus down the Mortis. I honestly have no idea how this is going to go.
Yeah, actually, now that we've loaded in, the army for Chaos looking very small now that it's actually deployed on the map, but sort of specialized, presumably, to deal with a Vampire Counts build that is more standard. Although the fact that the Dragon Lord isn't actually flying, also I missed the Banshees, I don't know where they were hiding, but nevertheless, the fact that there's no Dragon Lord on a dragon means that the Hell Cannons have much fewer targets, but nevertheless the Mortis engine will work out good enough, and the shots are going in. 2 shots.
I'm guessing he'll. Oh,
One
he
hits.
misses one of them. I'm guessing he'll fireball it as well and just try and focus it down. And I mean, if he's able to kill the Mortis, then there might be some difficulty in grinding through all the chaff and all the infantry for the counts. But I don't know. I feel like this is pretty difficult for the Chaos, to be honest.
Yeah, as soon as the frontline engage actually goes down, it could be rough. And healing too, and also some jukes from the Mortis engine, actually avoiding a lot of that damage, means that it will likely get into combat. Now, whether it dies to the Giant is yet to be seen, and an initial engagement of the Banshees is underway. They disengage, since Archaon with his magic damage is extremely scary versus them. They do not want to be taking that fight.
The Hell Cannon's missing everything, by the way.
Yeah, extremely unfortunate. The Mortis engine has healed up now, but there's still a long melee fight grind to go through. The monsters for Chaos are actually quite advantaged versus the monsters of the Vampire Counts here. So he'll likely have to save them for a late game. And if he gets any of his troops picked off, that would be extremely unfortunate. Not to mention the Fellbats are near useless in this situation. They'll have a very hard time even getting the Hell Cannons to rout or to die, since they are unbreakable.
Yeah, the Hell
But
Cannon's doing some good
yeah,
damage onto this infantry.
yeah, actually hitting both Graveguard units, bringing them down to half HP. Not terrible, but it means that they're not hitting other targets like the Mortis engine, and that's going to be the win condition here, really. The
He is
Mortis
going to
engine.
retarget onto the Mortis right now, which is definitely
Mhm.
what he needs to be killing. This might be kind of difficult. He might actually kill a lot of his own troops here.
Yeah, one miss and one hit.
Ooh,
An
big
Archaeon.
charge from Archaeon.
Yep, an amazing hit. Mortis engine has to disengage, and now we have a big monster fight. Syrenes are in on the mix, and oh no, is the giant overextending? Perhaps.
Ooh,
But
big burning head about to come down. Big burning head about to come down.
yep,
Roasting
and
the Sternsman.
oh man,
Oh my
that is
gosh.
amazing value over there.
160 kills on that.
Ooh, okay, so that's a pretty nice start, and that is definitely going to swing the favor wildly.
Ooh, and a Banshee already gone. One Banshee just gets destroyed by Archaon's magic damage, and the Giant onto the Mortis engine. And the Mortis engine is getting focused.
If the Mortis engine does manage to live, and Archaon is in a very bad situation, it could still win out the game here, but it's so important that it actually lives. With the Hell Cannons focus firing it, that's very rough. But a pick on Archaon might be what he needs. The Vargulf is hitting him for a ton of damage. The Blood Dragon Vampire Lord on foot is also extremely scary. And Chaos without their Lord is a very rough time. But Mortis engine now extremely low. Oh man, I'm not sure how this is going to go. Archaon's actually taking a lot of damage.
Oh, Fireball onto the Mortis. Oh, and it misses! No, Fireballs always miss.
And the lengthwise shot, Mortis engine,
Oh, and
of course,
another miss. Oh my
with its
gosh,
strange
this is unfortunate.
hitbox. Oh man, it's now in a safe position. And the Giant is taking a lot of damage too. The Blood Dragon Vampire Lord on foot actually proving to be quite scary. But if the Mortis engine dies, there's not a whole lot to kill the Halberds here. Chaos Warrior Halberds are extremely scary, but at the very least, the single entities continue to go down, and we'll have to see how well the Halberds do in the late game.
He needs to kill this Mortis somehow. I don't know how, but he needs to kill it. If he
Oh,
wants
and
to win this game.
Archaon moving in for the
Archaon
death
going
blow.
for it.
Bellbats moving
Archaon
in.
going for it. Oh, 150 HP. One more
And
hit.
one more hit will do it. Oh,
Down
and
it
it
goes.
goes down.
And the balance of
huge
power
play.
is in the favor of Chaos right now, actually.
Yeah, the Giant, left alone to die, will be going down. Archaon at half HP. But like I said, these Chaos Warrior Halberds are extremely scary. Getting friendly fired shot from the Hell Cannon, though,
Hell
not
Cannon,
helping.
I don't even know what it's doing. It's kiting or something. It's coming back. Archaon is surrounded. Oh, wow.
And the Hell
Is
Cannon
the Hell Cannon about to
aiming to
turn and
fire.
kill all of these knights?
We'll have to see how that goes. It'll actually do pretty well, but the Giant is gone, and the single entity game is great for vampire counts. Hell Cannon play, still quite scary. And if Archaon goes down, perhaps there's a chance with Terra routes, but we'll really have to see.
I think if Archaon goes down, that might be enough because they need Archaon for the magic damage to kill the Banshee as well. However,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Archaon is getting stabilized right now.
Yep, Hell Cannon actually got a lot of value with those two shots, slamming into the knights, causing them to crumble. But this hero squad, a Banshee, a Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, and a Vargulf are powering through, with their major threats being a half HP Archaon, down to 1/3 HP, and 2 Chaos Warrior Halberds. Also, not to mention, there are still 2 Hell Cannons that are operational, and they're quite scary if they can land their hits. Another miss on the Vargulf, a little bit unfortunate. And balance of power actually dead even.
Yeah, but there are a lot of these Chaos Warriors with Halberds. I think if Archaon doesn't get picked here, then this should be a favorable situation for the Chaos, but he needs to be careful not to get picked with Archaon.
Yep,
That is
speak of the devil,
definitely the number
Vargulf.
one way to lose this game.
Vargulf actually, okay, disengaging with those Halberds. Archaon trying to get in the counter charge, stopped by the Halberds. And it's a big fight. He knocks down the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, but he gets surrounded, disengages, and is once again safe.
Helm of Discord. I don't know if he's safe, though. He's getting chased down right now. He needs to... Oh, really nice. He actually slips back through his own Halberds.
Yeah,
He
one
just,
unit
he,
of
I think he needs to
Halberds.
sit with within like his own troops, honestly. I think he needs to not be running around so much.
Yeah, the Banshee and the Vargulf and the Blood Dragon Lord diving in
Oh,
onto
no.
him.
Archaon's getting charged.
Yep, a
Not
little
even getting
bit
a counter charge
of a
off.
misstep.
A little bit. His micro is lapsing. Oh boy. And
Yeah,
the balance
and
of power now pretty heavily in the favor of counts.
that is extremely surprising given how many halberds are left, but these single entities are quite expensive. The hell cannons are out of ammunition, and there is still a unit of black knights for cycle charging.
Okay, yeah, this
So
is
we'll
what
have
he
to
needs to
see.
do. He needs to just hide in his own halberds. He needed to do this a little while ago. Oh my gosh, he's getting pushed down somehow by the Blood Dragon Lord, though, still takes a hit.
Yep, and now we're
I
seeing.
think with his support, though, the halberds will win this eventually.
Yep. A disengage here, as long as it's not for cycle charging, it is illegal with the new rules. He is allowed to go and try and chase Archaon here, but a little bit of a rule break.
Well,
he is
chasing stuff off with his Black Knights.
What's it does? I don't think that lets you cycle charge though. We'll have to save it for the end of the game, but for now, the fighting continues on. The Black Knights engaging with Archaon, and looks like the Vargulf is pulling forwards too, to try and chase him down. Looks like he will likely get killed by the Vargulf. Still continuing to run away though, and the further he runs, the more time these halberds have to cut down the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord.
Yeah, Archaon unfortunately just can't seem to find a safe spot. If he could, then it would be enough, I think, but he is just totally unable to find any kind of sanctuary on this battlefield.
Yeah, now a zombie summon does go down. It buys time for the Blood Dragon Lord to disengage, and now they're heading back into the blob fight. Still, these halberds are still at very high HP. Archaon is a little bit too beat up to actually get cycle charges in. And a fireball does come down onto the Vargulf, putting in pretty good damage. With another disengage from Archaon.
Yeah, the Helm of Discord is really big, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's allowing the vampire accounts to trade up very heavily in these fights. And these are just Chaos Warriors. It's not like they're chosen. So they might be able to get dragged down eventually, just by consistent cycle charging and good control.
Yeah, they also don't have a lot. They don't have the immune to psychology that Archaon could provide, and neither do they have the leadership buff. And just given that all these single entities are at high HP, it puts the Chaos in a pretty rough position, where it puts them in a pretty rough position where they're actually on the verge of hitting army losses, despite having some units that can still fight. But the halberds are getting really low, and the Banshee is extremely threatening versus them. Charge does come in.
We'll see some nice damage from this Vargulf here onto the Chaos Warriors, which were not braced. And yeah, the Counts still have a lot of healing.
Oh, and nice fireball does come in. Onto the Vargulf. Archaon does begin to charge in. And a big fight ensues against this Vargulf. If it doesn't hit Archaon, he could actually take a kill here. And we'll have to see. Let's see here. Wow, Archaon still not taking hits. He actually knocks back the Vargulf. And he could still swing the fight as long as he never gets hit for the rest of the battle. But a big hit does go down. And it is army losses.
And that will be army losses.
Gee. But one sec. Rule check. Now, of course, yeah, there was a little bit of an instance of some cycle charging while chasing off a unit that was already broken. So yeah, I'm almost certain that that's not the case. So Papa Palpatine could take that if he wants to. Yeah.
We'd have to think.
We'll have to consult the rules, but
yeah, we'll have to consult the rules and we'll have to check the replay.
Yeah. So everybody hold for that. Yeah. All right. We got adminning issues here. Let's see. In in the result of a rule break, we'll have to see how this goes. That you can cycle charge with knights when single entity models are engaged. Yeah, you can cycle charge with knights, but you can't cycle charge with single entities. And we did see the Vargulf pull in and out to charge the halberds here. So that is what we're going to have to check. Archaon decided to attack the knights when he spam clicked on the Vargulf. Okay, Palpatine just talking about the game. But yeah, we'll have to see. Let's see. So first of all, we have to finish off this game. And then we can discuss in the lobby. But nevertheless, still a very contested game.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the two Hell Cannons, an interesting choice against the Mortis engine, actually doing a lot of damage, and I'm sure that well, they even hit the Graveguard for a lot of damage too. The Chaos Warrior Halberds were great for zoning out the large monsters, but they did a lot worse versus single entities than I would have expected. Chaos Spawn did okay, and I think the single entities for Papa Palpatine did get isolated pretty well and picked off. So yeah, an interesting build. I wouldn't rule it out entirely, and it actually proved to be pretty threatening with the game coming down pretty close. If Archaon had been healthier, Palpatine likely would have been able to pull out the win.